Sup y'all, and welcome to the Crisis Years and World War II, Part 9. In this video, we're going to finish looking at the defeat of the Axis. In July of 1939, two Hungarian scientists sought out the most famous scientist in the world, Albert Einstein, and they explained to him about the possibility of his famous equation E equals mc squared could theoretically be used to create an atomic bomb. Einstein replied that he had not thought of that. So Einstein was persuaded to sign a letter warning FDR of Germany's attempt to construct an atomic bomb of their own. This event encouraged the president and the US military to produce an atomic bomb first, and this would be carried out through a top-secret program called the Manhattan Project, which began in 1941 and ended in 1946. Allied heads of state met at the Potsdam Conference in July 1945 and laid out plans for dealing with Germany. Famously, the conference started with Churchill as prime minister. However, his Conservative Party lost seats in a general election and he was replaced by Clement Attlee. Now, arguably, the most important piece of business was agreeing to send an ultimatum to Japan to surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. By this point, the goal of the Manhattan Project had come to fruition, and the atomic bomb was now a frightening reality. Truman didn't learn of the project until FDR died, and he was sworn in as president. When Truman spoke to Stalin about the atomic bomb at Potsdam, he didn't seem surprised at all, and even asked when the US would use the weapon. It would seem that Stalin's spies helped him know more about the inner workings of the US government than even the vice president himself. To put the magnitude of the top-secret project in perspective, it cost the US taxpayers approximately $2 billion. By comparison, all other bombs, mines, and grenades in World War II cost the US around $3 billion. A number of scientists, directed by Robert Oppenheimer, were stationed in Los Alamos, New Mexico for almost 2 years. They were tasked with taking the theoretical bomb and making it an actual reality. Many other sites were utilized in the Manhattan Project, but an enormous amount of money and resources went toward making the fissile material, which refers to the nuclear fuel, uranium, and plutonium, which had to be refined enough to sustain a nuclear fission chain reaction, resulting in a nuclear explosion. By the summer of 1945, an atomic bomb called the Gadget was ready for testing. The code name for the first detonation of the atomic bomb was Trinity, and in a secluded desert in New Mexico, the test was carried out. The scientists who developed the atomic bomb took bets on how powerful the explosion would be, ranging from the bomb fizzling out and doing practically nothing to possibly igniting the Earth's entire atmosphere. The actual detonation packed a punch of around 22 kilotons of TNT. Realizing the horrific weapon they had created, the scientists petitioned that it should only be used as a demonstration and not on human populations. Nonetheless, while Truman was hesitant at first to use the bomb, knowing that it could potentially save lives, American and Japanese, its use proved to be inevitable. Shortly after the Trinity test proved successful, two bombs were ready for use: a plutonium-fueled bomb nicknamed Fat Man and a uranium-fueled bomb named Little Boy. Interestingly, the Japanese did communicate with the USSR to inform the US they would be willing to surrender if the emperor could retain his post. However, negotiating could put the Japanese in a position to request other stipulations, and the US policy was one of unconditional surrender, so the war continued. On a Monday morning, August 6th, a single B.29 superfortress, the Enola Gay, dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima, instantly killing around 70,000 people and causing thousands more deaths due to injuries or radiation poisoning. With the power of around 15 kilotons of TNT, over 70% of the city was obliterated. Hardly believing the accuracy of the reports, the Japanese High Command did not immediately surrender. 3 days later, on August 9th, Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki with the energy of 21 kilotons of TNT, killing over 35,000 people upon detonation. Being it was a cloudy day, the crew missed the intended detonation point by almost 2 miles, and the damage was somewhat less extensive. Interestingly enough, the Soviet Union finally declared war on Japan the same day. Facing utter annihilation, the Japanese announced their surrender on August 15th, and they formally signed their surrender aboard the USS Missouri on September 2nd. almost 6 years to the day of the official start of World War II. Known in the US as VJ Day or Victory in Japan Day, the war finally came to an end. So can the American use of atomic weapons be justified? This has been deliberated for decades. Germany did try to develop an atomic bomb, but failed. This was at least due in part to the Norwegian heavy water sabotage. From 1940 to 1944, a series of actions were undertaken by Norwegian saboteurs to prevent the German nuclear energy project from acquiring heavy water, or deuterium oxide, which could be used to produce nuclear weapons. Many of these men were captured and killed. After the war, Einstein became a renowned pacifist and called his signing of the letter the greatest mistake of his life. In 1947, he stated, "Had I known that the Germans would not succeed in developing an atomic bomb, I would have done nothing." Einstein later stated, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." A clear illusion that the use of nuclear weapons would bring an end to the civilized world. While the use of the atomic bomb was horrific, look at the graph showing the deaths attributed to wars since the start of the 20th century. The massive loss of life due to interstate wars plummeted after World War II, and there hasn't been a World War III. This is almost entirely due to the threat of nuclear weapons, arguably the only weapons devised by mankind that have saved more lives than they have cost. What have been far more costly are intrastate conflicts, or wars within states, such as civil wars. Recall how ardently the Japanese fought over small islands in the Pacific, and the heavy casualties suffered on both sides. Now just imagine the death toll and destruction if the Allies made a full assault on the Japanese home island of Honshu. The use of the bomb can also be explained as a warning to the Soviet Union, and can somewhat be considered the first shot fired in the Cold War. Regardless, the costs of World War II were immense. Over 60 million people had died, and around 20 million of them were soldiers. Without medical advances such as penicillin or blood plasma, the death toll would have been even higher. Some historians have considered the time from the start of World War I to the end of World War II as a modern 30 Years' War. The people of the world at that time had become desensitized to the massive destruction, depression, and despair. Nonetheless, the worst conflict in human history was finally over, and once again the world headed toward an uncertain future.